G'day, ladies and gentlemen. ScottyD here from the Australia's Tabletop Wargame Network, and welcome back for another installment in our competitive focus series here on the network. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the ATWN for the next installment in our competitive focus series, where we talk a bit more about the competitive game of Warhammer 40,000. And I've started off in our previous video looking at the Deathwatch, and we're going to be continuing that idea in this video. We're going to look at different Codex detachments from Codex Space Marines that you could utilize with Deathwatch, and where you can actually get some benefit and advantage from in the different detachments that you have available to you as well, outside of the Black Spear Task Force. But before we jump into the meat and potatoes of the video, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank everyone who has been supporting us over here on YouTube, whether that's commenting on our videos, liking them, watching them and such as well. Really do appreciate all of your feedback, all of your time spent watching our videos. It definitely is recognized and appreciated. So thank you so much to everyone who has been doing so. Now, before we jump fully into talking a bit more about the Deathwatch and how you can actually utilize some of the Codex Space Marine detachments, I'm going to pre-warn you, I'm going to be looking at different screens, so I might not be looking at the camera the entire time, as well as I'm going to have the Codex up. I'm going to be referring to notes and things as well throughout this video. So with that out of the way, let's jump on into it, shall we? Alrighty, so now the advantage that Deathwatch actually have is they are able to make use of these additional 7 detachments that Codex Space Marine has got. Now, there is 7 of them. There's a lot in here. However, I actually believe there's only about 4 that actually give Deathwatch a bit of an advantage as well when it comes to the tabletop in comparison to the Black Spear Task Force, which is a great detachment, as we discussed in the previous video. Now, the 4 different detachments I'm going to be talking about when it comes to Deathwatch today is going to be the Gladius Task Force, the Firestorm Assault Force, Stormlance Task Force, and the Vanguard Spearhead. And at the end, we're going to rank them, and I'm going to kind of explain the order in which I rank them and why. Now, each of these detachments does allow for Deathwatch to have a lot of a different approach compared to what the Black Spear Task Force gives you. And I think, expanding and looking at out-of-the-box ways of playing Deathwatch is something that I haven't really seen. And so I'm wanting to bring that to light a little bit, because looking at competitive lists and stuff for the Deathwatch, I've really found that with them, a lot of people just go, I'm going to run Black Spear or nothing, or maybe Gladius, which we are going to talk about Gladius. I do prefer the Gladius, but I'm wanting to try out some of these other ones as well. And so I want to kind of discuss them, the strengths and weaknesses, where you can really utilize them with some examples as well in your Deathwatch armies going forward. So again, the advantage that each of these detachments do have over the Black Spear Task Force is that they don't have the restriction like the unit restrictions do for the Black Spear, where you can't take Tactical, Devastator, or Scout squads. So that is something else to bear in mind with Deathwatch. Is there is that limitation, whereas in these detachments there are not. And so the first detachment we're actually going to be looking at is going to be the Gladius Task Force. Now, the Gladius Task Force was the index detachment for Codex Space Marines, and basically the way it works is you've got 3 different combat doctrines. Works very similar to the way the Black Spear Task Force works. So once per game, you can use one of these doctrines across your entire army. And so each of these doctrines give a different benefit to your army. Very similar to Black Spear, but a different form of benefit. So Devastator Doctrine gives you advance and shoot. Tactical Doctrine gives you fallback, shoot, and charge. And then Assault Doctrine gives you advance and charge. So really, it's instead of being the more damage flexibility that the Black Spear Task Force has, and where you're allocating your damage or how you're doing your damage, this actually allows you to get a lot more movement orientated on the battlefield. Utilizing fallback, shoot, and charge can be really strong as well on a really pivotal turn. Advance and charge is solid for a turn when you're wanting to get into melee, and advance and shoot is really strong if you do a shooting heavy build. So we're also going to look at the different enhancements with this detachment. You've got Artificer Armor. Now this one is a 2-up armor save with 5-up Feel No Pain. You've got the Honor Vehement, which is +1 strength and attacks to melee weapons of the bearer. And then when in Assault Doctrine, it's +2 strength instead. You've got the Adept of the Codex. This is one of my personal favorites. It is a captain model only. However, with this one, you get to put the bearer's unit into Tactical Doctrine instead of the active doctrine. Even if you've already used Tactical Doctrine, this game. And then the last one is Fire Discipline. Now, Fire Discipline is sustained hits 1 for ranged weapons for the bearer's unit and critical hits on 5s whilst in Devastator Doctrine. Out of these enhancements, you can reliably work with Fire Discipline and Adept of the Codex in with Deathwatch quite easily. They do work quite well. Particularly, I found that Tactical Doctrine for an assault-orientated unit works quite effectively because you're able to always maintain that priority in combat by doing so. Now, yes, the Honor Vehement is a great upgrade if you're wanting to do a combat character and really turn someone into a bit of a blender. It can really put someone into being a really solid combat character during Assault Doctrine as well. Even if you put it on a Watchmaster, giving that extra strength and attacks with Lance can be really beneficial. And then the Artificer Armor can really help with a character that maybe doesn't have an invulnerable save, giving them an increased armor save and that Feel No Pain save as well. Now, in terms of stratagem support, what these guys get is you've got Armor of Contempt. Everyone knows Armor of Contempt at this point. It's a battle tactic for 1 CP. You reduce the AP by 1 of incoming ranged or melee attacks during your opponent's shooting or fight phase. For 2 CP, you've then got Only in Death Does Duty End, and this is a fight on death ability. Basically, it is 2 CP as an epic deed, but it's automatically fighting on death rather than actually having it where it's, you've got to roll for it, basically, which some of the other fight on death abilities are, and you've got to roll to see if you do get that one. The next one is Honor the Chapter, which is a 1 CP battle tactic. It is Lance and an additional -1 AP for melee weapons during Assault Doctrine. Then you've got Adaptive Strategy, which is a 1 CP strategic ploy. Now, this one is you get to put one of your units in your army during your command phase into a doctrine, even if it's already been used this battle. So you can put, say, a unit of Stern Guard that I often do into Devastator Doctrine, which gives you critical hits on 5s. Combine that with Fire Discipline. Really strong combo right there. The next one you have got is Storm of Fire, which is during your shooting phase, you select one unit. You get to ignore cover and an additional -1 AP during Devastator Doctrine as well, which is, again, quite strong. And then the last one is Squad Tactics. It's a reactive normal move of up to D6 inches for a unit for infantry or mounted only. However, if you are in Tactical Doctrine, you get to automatically move 6 inches, and it's when an opponent ends a move, whether that's a normal move, advanced move, or fallback move within 9 inches. So in combination with your doctrines, there's a lot of versatility within the Gladius task force, in my personal opinion. So within the Gladius, you can be really versatile with Deathwatch. For example, you can build some units that do a lot of damage with shooting. You can also build some units that are really strong in close combat and really do a lot of solid damage. It allows for a bit more of a take-all-comers style Deathwatch list rather than trying to niche it into one particular manner than the other as well. Without focusing too much on shooting or too much on close combat. You kind of can do both within this detachment. So a few examples you can look at for units that you could run with a Gladius task force is you can really make use of Deathwatch veterans quite effectively here. Throw in 4 frag cannons into a unit with Fire Discipline in there on a lieutenant. Lethal sustained hits 1, it's D3 shots, blast D3, rapid fire D3. You can really do a lot of damage with that unit. You could also add in Infernus Heavy Bolters, doing very similar. But you probably wouldn't put Fire Discipline on with Heavy Bolters because they're already sustained hits 1. To bear that in mind, so you don't want to double up on that ability because you lose that effectiveness. Or you can go down the route of close combat, going long vigil melee weapons with Storm Shields, or Astartes Shields as they're called now, and Deathwatch Thunder Hammers to really be able to go, cool, I'm going to put this unit into advance and charge. Maybe you got a Watchmaster in there, which actually would mean you don't need to put them into Assault Doctrine to advance and charge. So you're able to go into combat. Maybe there's, you've got Honor Vehement on the Watchmaster. He's able to go in, do a whole bunch of attacks with Lance, maybe spend the CP to give the entire unit Lance. Their close combat weapons at minimum are strength 5. The hammers are strength 10. So it means that you're going to be able to wound on 3s against anything that's toughness 10, wound on 4s, anything toughness 11 or greater with the hammers, and then the swords are going to be wounding on 5s, which is really, really strong with the amount of attacks you output there as well. So you could apply the same logic as well with Deathwatch Terminators because you can do both shooting and close combat simultaneously. It means that if you want to go, say, do assault cannons, you could do 3 assault cannons with 2 more just Thunderhammer Storm Shield Terminators as well, give them a bit more beef to stick around a bit longer, do some additional stuff in combat, or you could do Cyclones, or you could do Plasma Cannons, or even the Heavy Flamers as well, but there's a better detachment if you're wanting to head down the Terminator Heavy Flamer brick route, which actually really makes them gassed up, which is really cool. And funnily enough, that is actually going to be our next detachment that we're going to look at, which is actually the Firestorm Assault detachment that we're going to look at. So we're going to skip past the other detachments to get to Firestorm Assault here. So Firestorm Assault really lends itself towards getting up in your opponent's face with shooting. Being in close range, because it gives all your range weapons assault on their ability, so it means you can advance and shoot all the time with everything in your army. And when within 12 inches, you actually get +1 strength. So it actually kind of pushes some units over some break points, which is really strong and allows you to actually improve some units' effectiveness. Stuff like Eradicators, they go up to strength 10 when within 12 inches rather than being strength 9. Same with the Macro Plasma Cannon on a Redemptor Dreadnought. When you overcharge it, pushes it to strength 10 at -4 AP, 3 damage, which is really strong on a Redemptor as well. So there's something else to bear in mind when you are looking at different things. Maybe things might have that extra range, but you want to target stuff closer because you get that additional strength bonus. And so being able to advance and shoot with everything really allows you to get up nice, close, and personal. By doing so, there's a few synergies that we're going to look at in a second, but in terms of enhancements, you got the Champion of Humanity, which is a Tacticus model only. And whilst it's leading a unit, that unit ignores any nor characteristic, roll, or test modifiers, excluding armor saves. So they still suffer AP. However, they are immune to battle shock modifiers. They're immune to ballistic skill and hit modifiers, things like that. So it's really strong to put on a unit that you're actually wanting to make sure that they're hitting with their shots and really putting their damage where they need it. The next one is the War Tempered Artifice. Now, this one is the infantry model only. It's +3 strength to the bearer's melee weapons, which is really good. Next one is Forged in Battle. So this one is, whilst it's leading a unit, you can change a hit roll or a saving throw to a 6 each turn. Now, it is once per turn, but you can do it once in your turn and once in your opponent's turn, which is really strong. So it means you can kind of help keep a unit a little bit more alive. And then the next one is the Adamantine Mantle. This one is -1 damage to attacks against the bearer, as well as if it is Melter or Torrent, it's actually reduced to just 1 damage, no matter what. So it could be a D3 damage Flamer. Nope, damage 1 for that. If it's a D6 +2 Melter, 1 damage. It's kind of nuts, which is really good. So these enhancements do have a place within a Firestorm Assault army list, particularly the Champion of Humanity and the Forged in Battle. I really think those two are probably the strongest. Being able to just ignore modifiers on something like Eradicators, they get reroll the hit, reroll the wound, reroll the damage, is really strong. I really like that. And being able to automatically get, say, a sustained hit or, a lethal hit or something with a 6 on from the Forged in Battle, really strong as well. So you've also got the War Tempered Artifice. This one I think is really, really good, particularly if you put it on a Power Fist character, because it puts him to strength 11, which means, again, it's hitting that break point and allowing you to go, okay, it's strength 11, so it means I'm wounding anything that's toughness 10 or lower on 3s. I'm wounding anything that is toughness 5 on 2s. I'm also wounding anything that's toughness 11 on 4s, anything that's greater than that, which is quite rare in the game, on 5s. So that's really useful there. You can do some combos with that we'll get into. And then Adamantine Mantle, it does have its place, but I'm not certain. Like, some armies do have quite prevalent Melter and Flamer options, but it's not something you're really seeing in the game too much at the moment, and it's a bit niche, particularly because you have to put it on a character model that's generally on foot. So in terms of stratagems for the Firestorm Assault detachment, you've got Armor of Contempt, same thing. 1 CP battle tactic, -1 AP to incoming range damage. But the other stratagems they get the Crucible of Battle. It's a battle tactic, 1 CP strat, It's during your shooting or fight phase, you select a unit that is yet to shoot, and when targeting the closest eligible target within 6 inches, they get +1 to wound. So you can really use that to combo off. Say unit of eradicators, you get within that 6 inches, you're at strength 10, you pop +1 to wound, you're now wounding on 3s. Re-rolling to wound. Can be quite strong there, in my opinion, and really bump up the damage on eradicators. Next one is the rapid embarkation stratagem. Now, this one is a strategic ploy for 1 CP. End of the fight phase, you select 1 transport without models in it and 1 infantry unit that's within 6 inches of it, provided they can embark into the transport if they're not within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units, and they can normally embark within that transport and didn't disembark from it this turn. So it means that you got to be smart with your transports, but if you combo your units off and you make sure you've got a unit outside as well as a transport that disgorges a unit as well, it means that the other unit can jump in if it doesn't get engaged. Then you have got the immolation protocols. Now, this one is interesting. It's a 2 CP battle tactic. It gives torrent weapons during your shooting phase, devastating wounds. So means that you're going to be able to push through some damage, particularly if you run a Redeemer. A Land Raider Redeemer being affected by this, because it's just an Astartes unit, can really be strong to push through a lot of 2 damage onto a unit with the dev wounds. You've then got Onslaught of Fire, which is a 1 CP battle tactic again. You select a unit that's disembarked to transport this turn. When it shoots the closest eligible target within 12 inches, add 1 to the hit roll, and if 1 or more enemy models are destroyed from these attacks, it means that they have to take a battle shock check. So 1 CP for +1 a hit, and if you kill a model, they have to take a battle shock check. Is kind of nice, particularly if that unit is on an objective. It means, cool, they could potentially then, you lose control of it. Say it's something like attempting target, can be really strong there for that as well. So that's something to bear in mind. The next one you have got is Burning Vengeance. This is a 1 CP battle tactic as well. During your opponent's shooting phase, after a unit that has been shot, you select 1 transport that was the target of those attacks. 1 unit that's embarked within that transport can disembark and shoot the enemy unit that shot at the transport. So if you've got the range to do that, that's actually really quite strong, and there's some ways that you can actually get that to pop off, which is quite nice. So within Firestorm, there's a lot of different synergies that you can make use of within Deathwatch that actually work quite effectively. Now, if you decide to give a Watchmaster, for example, the War-Tempered Artifice, or Champion of Humanity, it will turn them basically into a close combat monster, because they'll have fallback, advance, shoot, and charge on the unit, and he'll have lance. So he'll be able to damage and deal with a lot of vehicles and monsters without issue, because he'll be able to wound on 4s, basically. And he can turn one of those hits into a 6 during your turn, or he can make a save in combat if you give him Champion of Humanity. However, War-Tempered Artifice is probably the better option with +3 strength and lance. It puts him up to either strength 8 or strength 9 with his Long Vigil Spear, which is really strong and can do a lot of damage in combat at that point. There are some combos that you can pull off with Deathwatch Veterans as well. When you run 4 Infernus Heavy Bolters, if you pop either the Onslaught of Fire, the Crucible of Battle, or the Immolation Protocol stratagem on this unit, it really ups the damage potential for them, because you're going to be able to shoot both profiles. You're shooting the Heavy Bolter profile and you're shooting the Flamer profile. So it means if you're up close and personal, you can allocate, you have to allocate the weapon against the same unit, but it's got the 2 different profiles that you're firing. So really, really solid there with being able to just go, here's a Heavy Flamer that's strength 6 -1/1 damage that might have +1 to wound, or it's got devastating wounds. I've got 4 of them. There's 4d6 shots. Really, really strong there. Then you got the Heavy Bolters putting out 12 shots in addition to that. Sustained hits 1 and such too. So I think +1 to hit is probably really solid on these guys, targeting the closest unit if they are within 6. But you might want to be within 6 as well. So you can do something quite similar with frag cannons if you wanted to go down the frag cannon route as well. Doing 4 frag cannons. Now, this one I would definitely make sure you're nice up and close, so you get the rapid fire D3. It is heavy and blast as well, so a bit bigger unit's best for targeting that, but +1 to hit from a stratagem if you're within 6 really helps. Or another option as well is you take a unit of 5 Deathwatch Terminators with 3 Heavy Flamers. You know, you deep strike out of line of sight, for example, using rapid ingress. Then you move, advance, and then you fire all the Heavy Flamers into a unit. You get that +1 a wound or the devastating wounds. At strength 6 -1 damage. Really strong with that amount of shots, and then you could, you know, do whatever else you wanted to do with that unit, really be a nuisance. You know, yes, it's 210 points compared to 180 odd for the regular Terminators, but you're paying for the extra Heavy Flamer. And it actually really, well, the extra 2 Heavy Flamers in 5 guys, actually. So it can really pay off quite well. You could even use the Proteus kill team to do some work here by adding 3 Terminators with Heavy Flamers and 4 Veterans with Infernus Heavy Bolters for 7d6 Heavy Flamer attacks against a unit. That one you probably are wanting to spend for devastating wounds because that's the amount of damage you're doing. But it's 360 points, so it might become a little bit more viable when the balanced starter slate drops, and we hopefully will see some points drops in the next week or so for the Deathwatch to come as well. But that's just another combo, for example. There's a lot more combinations that you can explore with Deathwatch within the Firestorm Assault. I quite like it because it gives you that potential to just get up in your opponent's face with shooting, and Deathwatch shooting needs that. Particularly for the frag cannons, they're only 18-inch range, so being able to do that, as well as the flamers on the Infernus only being 12 inches. So being able to go between 7 and 12 inches during your movement phase really increases the threat range of frag cannons in particular, but if you get within that 9 inches, it means you're getting that rapid fire D3, doing a lot more damage, which is nice. So you can probably execute it on the table, and I'm sure there's more combos in the Firestorm Assault Force as well. So next up, we're actually going to jump to the next attachment, very similar to the Firestorm Assault Force, but is actually the Stormlance Task Force. Now, in the same way that the Firestorm focuses on shooting, Stormlance focuses more on combat. Now, this one gives all Astartes units in your army the ability to advance and charge, which is really quite strong. However, when we jump into it, it does look a little bit weaker for the Deathwatch in terms of using it. When we look at the enhancements, now, with Deathwatch having some of the most available damage 3 melee weapons in the game, being the Deathwatch Thunderhammers, being able to take 4 in a unit of 10, it means being able to advance and charge can really extend their threat range up to, 24 inches rather than only being at, approximately 18 inches at most. So really, really strong there. Now, yeah, it does remove some of the flexibility with the Watchmaster because he allows advance and charge as well. But at the same time, you're allowing more units in your army to go with different characters with different enhancements to be able to do such a thing as well. And speaking of enhancements, we're going to jump into them. The first one up is Fury of the Storm. Now, this is a mounted model only, and something you'll notice is that 2 of these enhancements are mounted only. So that's something to bear in mind. It's +1 strength and AP to the bearer's melee weapons, and when they end a charge, it's +2 strength and an additional -2 AP. So it can be quite strong, but it's a mounted model only, and the only mounted model they actually have access to is a chaplain on bike. So you've really got to be like, I've got to take a chaplain on bike to run one of these enhancements. So I do think that Fury of the Storm is quite a strong take, though, and I do rate Deathwatch bikers. You've then got Portents of Wisdom. Whilst leading a unit, you reroll advance rolls. Kind of nice, particularly if you throw it on a Watchmaster, for example. It means that you are able to then go, cool, I'm rerolling advances. I get advance, fallback, shoot, and charge. It's actually really solid on Watchmaster, in my opinion, for Portents of Wisdom. You've then got Fainting Withdrawal. Now, this one is for a character that might just give advance and charge. This will allow them to fall back and shoot as well. So there's that other option if you're not wanting to, if you've got a character that you can take that gives you advance and charge already, or there's a different kind of character that allows you to have that flexibility already, because the detachment allows you to also fall back and charge at the same time. Fall back and shoot in addition to that's really nice. Then you've got Hunter's Instincts, which is a mounted model only. This is the other mounted enhancement. You treat the bearer's unit when in strategic reserves, you treat the turn number as 1 higher. So turn 1 counts as turn 2 counts as turn 3. So there's some synergy there. Now, with the 2 enhancements that are specifically for the mounted characters, again, you've only got the chaplain on bike. However, Fury of the Storm is probably the most optimal of the two, really adding to the close combat potential for the Chaplain on bike in a unit of 6 Deathwatch veterans. But you can also put them into strat reserves with Hunter's Instincts, which is really strong because putting a unit of Deathwatch bikes of 6 of them with a Chaplain into your opponent's backfield, they've got 3 attacks, like the veterans are 3 attacks each at strength 5 -2 1 damage, is nothing to sneeze at, and that unit's 160 points plus the Chaplain, which I'd probably say is around 100 points, maybe 120 at most, is just ballparking it. So you're looking at, 260 to 280 for a unit that's able to go and clear the backfield of your opponent really effectively in turn 3. Turn 2, actually, because they get to come into your opponent's deployment zone. They've got the movement there. They can advance and charge, and they actually get to auto-advance 6 inches as well, which is really solid. Gives them 18-inch move to then be able to have a 30-inch threat range. Really strong. Really, really strong unit there that you can make with Deathwatch Bikers compared to running Outriders. But compare it to, say, Space Wolves, it's not going to do as much damage as Thundercat. Now, the Portents of Wisdom and Feigning Withdrawal are both interesting choices, but you're more than likely to take the Portents of Wisdom over the Fainting Withdrawal, unless you're putting, non-Watchmaster characters and non-Lieutenant characters, because base Lieutenants for Space Marines allow you to fall back and still shoot, and the Detachment allows you to fall back and charge, so it gives you the full package on the Lieutenants as well. So that's something to bear in mind. You're probably not going to end up necessarily taking Feigning Withdrawal on your key units, so that's something else to bear in mind there. You're probably going to take Hunter's Instinct. You may end up taking Fury of the Storm, but you probably are going to take Portents of Wisdom, in my personal opinion. So now, as we were saying, a little bit less value here for the Deathwatch compared to some of the other detachments. But now we get into the stratagem support that this detachment does allow you to have. Of course, you've got Armor of Contempt in there, as it always is. Opponent shooting or fight phase, you reduce AP by 1. Really, really strong there. Then you've got, now, Blitzing Fusillade is a 1 CP battle tactic stratagem. You select one unit that hasn't been shot this phase, its ranged weapons gain the assault ability, and if they've already got the assault ability, they get in sustained hits 1. So this is really nice because you can actually create a good combo shooting-wise, particularly if you take a non-Space Marine unit that's already got the assault keyword. However, most Deathwatch units don't have the assault ability on their shooting weapons, so they will never get the benefit of sustained hits 1. Just something to bear in mind. The next stratagem is Full Throttle. Now, this one is a Wargear stratagem of 2 CP. You select a mounted or vehicle model that isn't a walker. During your movement phase, it can auto-advance 6 or auto-advance 9 if it is a mounted unit. So 2 CP for auto-advancing 9 additional 3 inches, not necessarily the greatest, but the auto-advance 6 on, say, a flying vehicle or just a vehicle in general can be quite good when you need it. Next up, you have got Shock Assault. It's a 1 CP battle tactic stratagem. Now, you select one mounted unit during your charge phase that hasn't declared a charge. Until the end of the turn, you get to re-roll the charge roll, and models in that unit have the Lance ability. This will just boost what Deathwatch bikes are able to do. It gives them strength 5 plus 1 to wound on the charge, which is really, really strong in my opinion. Strength 5 going up a lot of units in the backfield that are generally T4, maybe some vehicles at T10, T9. So you're going to be able to at least wound vehicles on 5s, or you're also going to be able to wound infantry on at least 3s, if not 2s, with that AP -2 1 damage, which is really strong with the Chaplain included there as well. Then you've got Ride Hard, Ride Fast. Battle tactic stratagem for 1 CP. You select a mounted unit or a flying vehicle during your opponent's shooting phase that is selected as a target. -1 hit, -1 wound. That's actually quite strong on bikes as well, I would say, or any more durable Space Marine flying vehicles, such as a Gladiator or a Storm Strike speeder as well. Then you've got Wind Swift Evasion. This one is a 1 CP strategic deploy. It's a reactive move. You select a unit that an enemy unit ends a move within 9 inches of during your opponent's movement phase, and your unit can move up 6 inches, but you can't select units within engagement range, of course. So again, reactive moves are quite nice and can get you into some nice positioning as well. So these stratagems do make up for a lot of support that you do end up losing from the enhancements within this detachment, I believe. But still, they're more geared towards the assault side of things. So as I've said, being able to give units range weapon assault or sustained hits 1 if it already has the assault's ability is good, but it doesn't really help Deathwatch. It helps more mainline Codex units, so something like Eradicators, for their assault is probably a bit more pivotal, or something like Sternguard, because they've got the assault keyword, giving them the sustained hits 1, put a lieutenant in there for lethals as well. You've basically got the same combo as what you have base in a Gladius, for example. Having a reactive move, though, is quite strong, particularly when you need to keep units alive. So being able to also auto-advance 9 inches for mounted can be quite strong, but it is 2 CP to do so. So it's a bit more of an investment, and it can ensure greater charge distances and greater threats from your Deathwatch bikers, which are a lot stronger in this detachment. Being able to give a unit lance, as we've said, for Deathwatch bikes is quite strong as well, because, being strength 5 melee weapons and not being able to get above that means that the lance there is really going to assist them against harder targets, wounding on 5s against vehicles, for example, or wounding on 2s and 3s against other infantry too. And also being able to protect your own units with that -1 to hit and wound as well, whether that is the bikes, or that is another flying vehicle as well, is quite strong there. So now overall, the Stormlance can provide some great synergy with Deathwatch, and it's better used in a more combat dedicated build. When you're really focusing on veterans to get in combat and bikes as well, maybe you got a unit of outflanking bikes with a chaplain with that enhancement, and then on top of that, you've also maybe got a few other units of bikes floating around as well to really make use of that. But there's a few mainline Codex units that you're probably going to want to include as well that will detract away from the Deathwatch focus. Sternguard is one of them in this detachment, is really good. And say Gladiator Lancers or Reapers to be able to, move around quite quickly. You can give their weapons assault and such as well, which is really quite nice. And Deathwatch bikes are probably what are going to shine in this detachment, taking units of 6 for 160 points compared to Outriders. So much better, and I praised them in the last video, and I'll continue to praise them because they are so much better than Outriders in my personal opinion. So their output can really be boosted in this detachment as well, very similar to the Gladius. So then we come to the last detachment we're going to look at for these guys, and that is actually going to be the Vanguard Spearhead. Now, Vanguard Spearhead is quite interesting for Deathwatch, because it means that if you're being shot outside of 12 inches, you're -1 to hit, and you get the benefit of cover, which is awesome, actually. It really means that Deathwatch units are able to survive a bit longer, because you're going to have fewer units on the table playing Deathwatch. It will actually allow them to survive a lot longer outside of range. It means you can play with some really interesting units that the Deathwatch have that maybe you haven't thought about utilizing in a particular way. So I'm keen to share some thoughts on this one. So again, the ability for -1 to hit is quite strong on the Vanguard. Really do like that. And allows some synergy with pouring in longer range firepower in your opponent outside of 12 too. In terms of enhancements, you've got the Blade Driven Deep. This gives to an infantry model only, whilst the bearer's leading unit, it gains Infiltrate. The unit can infiltrate, which is so strong. It is really strong. We've seen that used quite effectively. We saw that at Uprising with Brody Middleton, using that on a unit of aggressors to infiltrate and then get that advance on 6 with Caligar into one of Rowan's warrior units and go to town. So it can be quite effective on a combat unit or even a shooting unit that you want to hide away as well. You've got the Ghostweave Cloak, which is stealth and lone operative. Next up, we've got the Execute and Redeploy. So it's a Phobos model only, but after the bearer unit has shot, if they're not within engagement range, they can make a reactive move of a normal move of up to 6 inches. However, you can't stack multiple reactive moves. You can only do this one. With this ability, if you have, say, a Phobos Lieutenant in the unit who has the D6 ability, you can't do both. Then you have also got the Shadow War Veteran. This is a Phobos model only, but once per battle, after an enemy unit uses a stratagem, you can increase the cost until the end of the battle by 1 CP. It is a Vect ability in this list as well. So these are some great enhancements, but there are 2 that are only limited to Phobos, which is the Execute and Redeploy and the Shadow War Veteran. However, the Infiltrator's ability for Deathwatch and any Deathwatch unit is actually really quite strong. You could actually put this on a unit of 10 Deathwatch Terminators and put them in the midfield, and it'll actually kind of make them a solid threat. And it's like, cool, I'm not suffering from my 5 inches of movement. You want to come into the midfield, you're going to have to deal with this brick. Maybe you've got a captain in there, which gives you reroll charges. So you're able to go, okay, I'm able to move 5 inches, then reroll the charge against any units in my opponent's turn. Really get up into their face, which is quite nice. Stealth and lone op can be quite strong for a solo character that you're wanting to keep safe from being shot outside of 12 inches. Maybe you're wanting to expose that character onto center field objectives if they've already got the infiltrate ability, for example. So another really good option there as well. The redeploying a unit after it's been shot can work quite well with the Spectrus kill team, funnily enough, with las fusils and autocannons. So that's something to bear in mind. And then having a second vect ability within the list is very strong, because it means you take a Watchmaster, because Watchmasters are great. You make him your warlord, and then what you can do is maybe hide it, and then on top of that, you can also then, you've got that vect, and then you've got the Phobos vect as well, which can be quite effective too.
So in terms of what other stuff you can do with these enhancements, redeploying a unit after it's shot, it actually works quite well with, say, a Spectrus kill team with las fusils and autocannons, which can actually put out a ton of firepower, and then you move it back into safety in ruins, which can be really solid. And then also having a second vector ability within your army list is actually really quite strong. Can mess up with your opponent's game plans, because you can use the Watchmaster's one, and you could probably hide a solo Watchmaster as your warlord with lone op and stealth, and then you've got a Phobos character that is going to be able to do the Shadow War Veteran as well, so you can increase something by 2 CP for a battle tactic if you wanted to, or you could really increase 2 different battle tactics by 1 CP to really increase the cost of some of those utility stratagems that a detachment might have. Now, in terms of your own stratagems, and what you get access to is you've got a Deadly Prize. This is a war gear stratagem for 1 CP. You select an infantry or mounted unit that's within range and controlling an objective marker at the start of your command phase. It becomes a sticky objective for you, and it is sabotage. So when an enemy unit ends move within range of the objective marker, you roll a d6. On a 2+, they actually suffer d3 mortal wounds, which can be nice and can really finish off a unit if they are down to a couple of models, if you sticky it and then they move onto it, which is really strong. You've then got Armor of Contempt. It's the same as the other 3 detachments. All Space Marine detachments have Armor of Contempt at the moment. And then you've got Surgical Strikes. This one is a 2 CP battle tactic stratagem. You select 1 infantry unit that's yet to fight during the fight phase. All melee attacks they have get precision. I don't really rate this one for 2 CP, to be honest, but it has its niche use cases. Then we have got the Strike from the Shadows. It is a 1 CP battle tactic stratagem. Now, this one is you select 1 infantry unit that hasn't already shot during this shooting phase. When they're shooting at a target that's outside of 12 inches, they get +1 to their ballistic skill and an additional -1 AP. And if one or more enemy units is actually destroyed, one or more enemy models is actually destroyed because of these attacks, the enemy unit must take a battle shock test. Again, it's another battle shock strat, which is really strong. And I like this for, say, something like Devastated Centurions to give their las cannons AP -4, the missiles AP -3, really boosts their shooting potential as well, which is quite nice. You've then got Calculated Feint. It's a strategic place stratagem for 1 CP. You select 1 infantry unit that was the target of a charge during your opponent's charge phase, and you make a normal move up to d6 inches. And if it's a Phobos or a Scouts unit, you can move 6 inches. So again, it's a more specific reactive move. You can't do it when an enemy unit moves within 9, but you are able to do it when you are facing a charge to make that charge a lot harder, which is quite nice. And then you've got the Guerrilla Tactic stratagem. Now, this is a 1 CP strategic ploy. You can select 1 infantry unit or 2 Phobos or Scout units. And at the end of your opponent's fight phase, place those units into strategic reserves, but the selected units must be more than 3 inches away from all enemy models and can't be within engagement range, obviously, as well. So some really strong stratagems, and they work quite well for Deathwatch, surprisingly, even if you include 1 or 2 Spectrus kill teams, because Spectrus kill teams are probably the cheapest kill teams that you get, and they are actually, in this detachment, quite strong. So that's probably something you are wanting to maybe consider when running this detachment as well. So when we look at Vanguard,
for Deathwatch, specifically in a few things. Being able to sticky an objective turn 1 with an infiltrated unit is really strong. Giving precision to melee is kind of niche, honestly, and it is expensive to pull it off. So I don't think this list really wants to be in combat. So you're not really going to do too much for combat build outside of maybe one unit that you want to send in your opponent's face with using the blade-driven D. Striking from the shadows, again, is very strong, particularly when you have long-ranged weapons. You might see Deathwatch veterans with Infernus heavy bolters utilizing this, using their 36-inch range on the heavy bolters to get that +1 to hit, trying to sustained hits there as well, get more shots off with 12 shots in a 10-man unit, and then also kind of screen out an area with the heavy flamers with Overwatch. Really quite a strong option. And having a reactive move and an ability to place 1 or 2 units into strategic reserves is actually quite strong as well for mobility within this army list too. So you're able to utilize, if you use 2 Spectre's kill teams, for example, you can pick both up if they're outside of 3 inches of your opponents, and then you bring them on into strat reserves the following turn where you need them, which is actually quite good if you pair them with, say, a lieutenant in each. Bit of a pricey combo, but I reckon it is well worth it. We'll explore that in a future video where we'll actually look at some lists, one for each of these detachments, which is the plan as well. Now, infiltrating a Watchmaster with either a shooting or a melee focused Deathwatch veteran brick is really strong. You could even do it with a Proteus kill team, but that will then put them at around 500 points, which is quite expensive. But being able to advance fallback shoot and charge, again, still very strong there as well. The double vect is just so nice. Even if you take a second Watchmaster as your Warlord, run in with Lone Op and Stealth. So, you can keep that vect safe. You have a Phobos character that's got the second vect. You use that other vect first, and then you use the Watchmaster's vect second. Really keeps them a little bit safer. So there are a few other things you could foresee with the Vanguard. You could see using missile launchers on the Deathwatch veterans to really double down on your long-range firepower in conjunction with Strike from the Shadows. But there are other potential combos if you want to run a couple of units of 5 Deathwatch Terminators with 3 Cyclones. Could be quite strong as well to kind of control some fire lanes, which would be nice. So this detachment, it does allow for a lot more variety in terms of Deathwatch units you can take as well. Even utilizing the Spectre's kill team now, as we covered in the previous video, I think the Spectre's kill team is the most cost-effective for what you get. And I think it is probably the best one you are wanting to potentially run if you can run it and make use of it. And I think Vanguard Spearhead makes perfect use of it here as well, particularly with the strategic reserves ability, meaning that you can bring them on. You can take 2 of them off in a single turn as well. Controlling where you deploy them with infiltrate. Say if you include a Phobos captain as well, it means that you can actually put units into strategic reserves or redeploy them as you see fit as well. So it can really actually kind of do this feinting maneuver with your opponent and go, yeah, I'm going to pick these units, I'm going to redeploy them because of the Phobos captain. And it's going to be really nice to actually control where you are placing them. Now, this detachment does allow for a lot more variety in terms of Deathwatch, even being able to run the Spectre's kill teams and actually being to be quite effective within this detachment. You can use a Phobos captain as well to redeploy them, do some fun shenanigans to really mess up your opponent's plans and control kind of the tempo of the game with that as well, which is really strong. And I think this is a great detachment for Deathwatch as well. Now, whilst we have looked at each of these 4 detachments, I actually want to share why I didn't have a look at the remaining 3 before we go into where I rank each of these detachments as well. In terms of the First Company Task Force, I felt as though that was a bit too limited. Yes, it is veteran-focused for sure with Terminators, Stern Guard vets, Vanguard vets, but it doesn't include Deathwatch vets. So it really, it's going to be expensive detachment for what you're getting. Yes, you do get some great benefits, but you have to lean into Deathwatch Terminators a lot, and they're already more expensive than Codex Terminators as it is, so it's probably not the best detachment to go with for Deathwatch. In terms of Iron Storm, this is actually a vehicle-heavy playstyle with a lot of the enhancements going on to Tech Marines, meaning that it's not necessarily geared the way that Deathwatch want to play, which is a lot more infantry-style units, doing a lot more with their infantry units. And sure, you can run 2 Corvus Black Stars if you wanted to and do some shenanigans with some Tech Marines, but I really think you're not wanting to really go down the Iron Storm route. And then the Anvil Siege Force, it does lean to a more stationary style force to gain the benefits that it's got from heavy. And Deathwatch having less units on the battlefield compared to regular Codex Marines as well means you're going to be wanting to move your units a lot more into different spots, and which means you're negating the effects that you get from the benefits of the detachment as well. So that's something else to bear in mind. So I really think that the 4 detachments we covered, the Gladius, Firestorm, Vanguard, and Stormlance, are probably the 4 that you're wanting to make use of. So out of these 4 detachments, I unironically just told you the order that I rank them in. Where I think they land, I think we have Gladius Task Force first. I think that the Gladius Task Force being able to have a take all comers build within a detachment is really good. It encompasses what you need from Firestorm and Stormlance in the one detachment, which is really strong, benefiting both, and it's got a fight on death. And I think that is probably the one thing that sets it apart than some of the other detachments here, is because yes, it is 2 CP, but if you have a unit of Deathwatch vets that's combat focused with a Watchmaster, they can go in. If you've got the CP in pocket, you know, if you think you're going to lose the unit to what they're going into, you pop fight on death during your opponent's turn, because more than likely you go in and you kill what you charge. If you cop the charge back against a melee army, then you're like, okay, great, I'm going to be able to fight on death. So it does set them apart. I think the Gladius is probably the best detachment for Deathwatch outside of Blackspear to be running. Next up is Firestorm. I think Firestorm can be built in such a way that you can have a savage Deathwatch list that just gets up into your opponent's face and just is really oppressive, controlling the mid board, getting in some close combat threats. I don't think you have as many close combat threats as you might in, say, Gladius. You might have 2 to 3 combat threats in a Gladius. You might only have 1 or 2 in a Firestorm, really focusing on that assault keyword being applied to all your shooting weapons, so more of a shooting build, and really making use of some of their stratagems there. I think Vanguard Spearhead comes in at 3rd because it means you're protected from range a bit more. You can engage at range. You can pick up, put down those Spectrus kill teams, which are able to do a lot of damage with las fusils, auto cannons. You know, they could screen midfield for you within the infiltrate ability, and then you can redeploy them. With a Phobos Captain, I think that Vanguard is really going to be an interesting Deathwatch style list as well. And then number 4 is going to be Stormlance. I think Stormlance coming in 4th makes sense because Deathwatch don't have access to some really solid mounted units. Yes, I rave and I praise the Deathwatch bikes for being better than Outriders, but on top of that, Thundercav are much better than Deathwatch bikes. So it's kind of the 4th detachment, but if you're wanting to run a melee-focused Deathwatch build, you can definitely run the Stormlance as well. But I think you get much better benefit out of doing several close combat units in a Gladius because you get mixed benefits. And again, that fight on death, because Stormlance doesn't actually have a fight on death as well. And Gladius Task Force does have a reactive move, even as the Stormlance does as well. So that kind of covers it for the 4 different main detachments from the main Space Marine Codex that you could make work with a Deathwatch army list. And I'm excited to actually do some spicy cooking with some lists and bring them to you in the future as well. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, that is going to be it for our competitive focus video on the Deathwatch. Looking at the different detachments that you can utilize from the Space Marine Codex. I hope that you found this beneficial and kind of thinking outside of the box in terms of how you can play Deathwatch competitively and what you could actually make use of in each of these detachments as well. And as I've said, we are going to do the next competitive focus video where I'm going to look at a couple of different lists for each of these detachments and kind of explain why you want to maybe run them the way that they are built. And I'm going to test some of them out as well. And maybe even throw in a Black Spear Task Force list in there too to kind of go, this is what a Black Spear might look like that you could run. And you could compare it to the others as well and have a look at them and see what you think and give me your feedback. But if you did enjoy this video, ladies and gentlemen, feel free to hit it with a like. If you want to catch more of this style of content, or you have any of your own thoughts you want to share or any feedback, feel free to leave it down in the comment section below. And as per usual, if you do enjoy the content we create here at the network, feel free to hit that subscribe button, turn on that notification bell so you're able to be notified as to when we are releasing more content here on the ATWN as well. Also, if you do want to catch us live when we're doing tournament coverage or we're doing hobbying sessions where we can have a bit more of a lengthy discussion about such topics as these as well. Feel free to follow us over on Twitch at AustralisTWN, where you can catch hobbying sessions and live tournament coverage and tournament previews from us, where, you know, we're going to be able to be in that competitive mindset and talk about such units as well, which is really awesome. And I also want to give a massive shout out to our Ko-Fi members and our Twitch subscribers as well. Your financial support helps us to keep on going, covering our business costs, as well as create more content for the various series that we do and improve our tournament coverage efforts as well. I really appreciate it. So if you do feel like supporting us financially, you can either do so through subscribing on Twitch, or you can head over to the Ko-Fi page, check out the memberships, which are all linked down below. And memberships are, you know, as little as $5 or $10 Australian a month, and really do help us out. But ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching today's video, and I'll catch you in the next one.